Hello, everyone. Good morning from Birmingham in the United Kingdom. I'm Dr. Ahmed, the outgoing chair of the Volunteering and International Psychiatrists Special Interest Group within the Royal College of Psychiatrists, widely known as VIpSIG. And I'm excited to introduce you the very first episode of the VIpSIG podcast. For a long time, we wanted to expand our reach beyond newsletters and share message by using multimedia, but I hesitated, concerned about technical issues and getting everything just right. Then I reminded myself perfection is the enemy of good work. Instead of waiting for the perfect setup, I plunged into to record this podcast using basic MS Team features. With both of us simply using our laptops, no specialized microphones, no professional studio setup. You might notice that part of my screen is cut off, but thankfully our guest Dr. Peter Hughes is fully visible. And that's what really matters. I've embraced the Japanese concept of wabi sabi, finding value in imperfections. Because what truly matters is sharing ideas, not waiting for perfections. This was recorded on a Saturday morning as an example of micro volunteering in our spare time. Rather than over focusing on production quality, the goal is to start conversations and connect with a wider audience. That said, I would love your feedback. Is the sound clear enough? And if anyone with technical expertise know why MS Team cut off part of my screen, please let me know so that we can improve our next episode. And that way, you too can take part in our concept of skill syncing in volunteering. So, without further ado, let's dive into our first VIpSIG podcast with Dr. Peter Hughes. And I hope you find it inspiring. Thank you for listening. Hello, welcome to Beyond Borders, the VIpSIG podcast, a brand new 10-minute series from the Royal College of Psychiatrists Volunteering and International Psychiatrists Special Interest Group, widely known as VIpSIG. I'm Dr. Ahmed, current chair of the VIpSIG, and I'm very pleased to have served in this role for the past 4 years. VIpSIG is all about connecting global mental health professionals, sharing best practices, and learning from both successes and challenges. Through this podcast, we are harnessing technology to reach our global members and the wider public, breaking free from publication bias by openly discussing not just what works, but also the lessons from setbacks. For our very first episode, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Peter Hughes, who has been a true inspiration for me in getting involved with VIpSIG. Dr. Peter Hughes is a consultant psychiatrist based in UK with over a decade and a half of experiences in global mental health. He has worked with WHO, United Nations, and non-UN organizations, as well as through individual volunteering. His main areas of interest include emergency mental health in conflict zones, primary healthcare integration, image gap implementation, and supervision. He was the founder of VIpSIG in 2011, creating a vital platform for psychiatrists to engage in meaningful international work. His book, Volunteering in Global Mental Health, A Practical Guide for Clinicians, was published in 2023 by Cambridge University Press and is an essential resource for those interested in this field. So, Dr. Hughes, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Let's dive in. How are you and where are you now?
Right. I'm feeling good. I'm back home for a while in the UK. And in this global work that you do, you never know where you're going to be from tomorrow. So you wait for the call to see where you might be going next. Most of last year I spent in Syria. So yeah, there's always new things coming up.
That's great. You're back home now. So, we will listen to your stories from Syria. Let's start with the history first. You set up the VIpSIG. So, what inspired you, VIpSIG?
Right. Well, firstly, I'd kind of set up my own volunteering for myself in Malawi, and it was quite hard to do. And it was really a challenge. And then I came back to the UK and I thought, what does the college do? And I contacted the college and I found out about the volunteering scheme. I ended up in some of the international committees. And then I saw that there was a huge interest by psychiatrists and especially trainees in doing global mental health work internationally, volunteering work. So I saw there was the need, so it wasn't that hard of a thing to think about because there was a real gap. So we set up the VIpSIG in 2011, and I'm really glad that it's still going and going strong.
It's really inspiring to hear from you that it's going strong, me being the third chair. So, over the year, how has it evolved from your perspective?
So it evolved from being quite small, and then we had a lot of very passionate people. We linked it in with a number of really kind of exciting projects now that I look back on it. We had a great project in Sudan, which, as you know, is having its very hard times these days. We had a project that ran over quite a period of time, and we had online supervision afterwards for Sudan. We've had projects then in India that were directly linked to the VIpSIG. And I suppose for me, kind of the culmination of my role has been really the book, as you've mentioned, bringing it all together. But what I think has been really great is it's been a great platform and a focus for people contacting. And I'm sure, Ennis, like myself, you get emails every day from people asking about global mental health and the opportunities and how they get into it. So I think it's been a huge resource for helping people in that area and being source of advice and direction.
You're indeed right. I've received loads of emails and communications, and it inspires us to continue that work. Um, I would like also I would like to know what drives you personally to keep this work going, because most of us are full time at work. So this we do as volunteering in our spare times. So from your experience, what is it that's driving you to carry this work?
It's hard for me to put my finger on it. I've worked in the NHS for many, many years, and I have to say I always loved my job, and it was always a pleasure to work. The agony was being able to do global work as well. And I would ask my trust every year for time off to do international work. I would get refused like 2 out of 3 times. So it was a real battle. But I know that when I'm working globally, it's just it just feels right. And I really feel that this is my home doing this work internationally. And uh, it's I can't say what it's like because it's kind of a visceral feeling of the satisfaction and enjoyment of helping people. It's being with people and knowing that you can actually make a difference. A bit of a cliche, but you probably can. And celebrating really the training that I had in the UK and other countries, which has really helped me be armed with working overseas. And the cultures and different societies are just so, well, fascinating. And I learn something new every time I'm away. And I learn something I can use back in the UK every time I'm away.
That's wonderful to hear. Can you share a powerful moment from your volunteering experience abroad?
Okay, so putting me on the spot, I can think of probably lots of little moments. Like I remember training some people in northern Pakistan, and these were primary care doctors, and there was one woman in the group, a GP, a female GP, which is such an important um, role in Pakistan, and I could see that she got what we are trying to say, which is about making psychiatry and mental health accessible and easy. It doesn't have to be very fancy or anything. And it's a lot about being sympathetic and humane to people. And that kind of thing was just so satisfying. Another thing I was just thinking of was in my last work in Syria. Now, I'm not a child psychiatrist, but I had to work with children, which was I was very nervous about. And I really got to like it as well, working with these children who had been through the war in Islamic State area, and they were had all seen terrible things. But I would say to some of, like one kid, I remember telling him, uh, "You've got to stop hitting your sister." And the next time I saw him, I asked his mother, and she said, "Oh yeah, he stopped hitting his sister." And it was really, I thought, wow, maybe things do can be can change. Um, so other sorts, I've got so many cases I can think of, where I think just being humane and sympathetic to people in a clinical setting has really been the most helpful thing. For a lot of my work in more recent years, it's been about training or what we call capacity building of doctors or nurses or psychologists or other people in developing their mental health skills. And when you see people improve and get it and are able to apply the knowledge, and the knowledge is not something coming from the West, it's something that we've picked up that's kind of global from a global perspective. So I can think of other examples of
Yeah,
gender-based violence, which becomes a huge thing where uh, having to look at broader than being a psychiatrist, help with people in a practical sense has become really important.
that's really inspiring to hear this snippet of stories which can make a big difference in people's life. Now, often people see volunteering as giving back, but what do psychiatrists themselves gain from volunteering? How does it shape them professionally and personally?
Well, I always used to say that half my knowledge and skills has come from my international work. I can't really, I don't really know what I was like when I was first a psychiatrist because so much has come from my later global work and what I've learned internationally. I've learned so much about the psychosocial side of things, the cultural side of things, and I use that every day when I'm working in the UK. I think it has made me a better psychiatrist. It's also made me very aware of resources. So internationally, for example, when people are being prescribed a medication, you've got to think, can they afford that? And I've been caught out in Somaliland. There was a patient being prescribed something, and I didn't think to ask. But now, afterwards, I realized that that patient and his family could not afford the medication, which they had to buy in the market. So there was actually no point. So I think the economics of this are very important, and uh, the socio-economic factors in mental health become very something you think about a lot after working internationally.
I think that's led us to the point I wanted to discuss with you about working in the resource poor settings, which comes its own sets of challenges. So, what are the biggest obstacles you have faced apart from the economic side, and how did you navigate them, those kind of challenges in resource poor as well as in the conflict zones?
Well, thinking of the resource poor areas first, it's you go to clinics where you'll see primary care doctors, for example, might have 100 people in their clinic a day. They might have 1 or 2 minutes. So it's really, really difficult to get to do any sort of mental health intervention with that sort of timing. So it's about, well, I suppose one of the things that's been really good in some of the people I've worked with has been able to change things at a government level and help restructure services so that it's more um, responsive to people's needs. In conflict zones, which I've been through a lot, it's just adapting. Um, Sometimes patients will be seen in a makeshift place. You try and do things like put up at least a sheet or something to provide some sort of confidentiality and privacy and respect and dignity for the person. Uh, you've got to make sure that the person is safe. and you try and ensure that they're safe and that the children feel safe as well, which can be very difficult when it may not be safe.
Can you tell us a story where, in case of resource poor setting, how you prioritize your work as a psychiatrist? We often talk about the biopsychosocial model, but we tend to forget that as a psychiatrist, we could be a social worker, we could be a carer, or we could be just a listening person to people's sufferings. Um, would you be able to share any stories where, as a psychiatrist, you have made in a resource poor setting, you have made a big change?
Well, I can think back on one of the biggest influences on my life was the Haiti earthquake in 2010, where we arrived, 220,000 people were killed, hundreds of thousands were homeless, and we heard such stories every day. I found that I expected to be dealing with PTSD all the time. I expected to be prescribing lots of diazepam and whatever, but I prescribed very, very little. What I would do is I would see people, because I was doing clinical work there, I would see people. One of my first questions is, have you got a place to stay tonight? Are you safe there? Especially when we had so many cases of rape. Almost every day I would see someone who'd been raped. And we would, if they didn't have a place to stay, I would contact someone to get a tent or some form of accommodation. My job was to make sure people had a place to live, that they had food. Sometimes that involved getting them a bus ticket so they could go to their family who lived up north, for example. It was really stretching what one would think of as psychiatry skills. I never saw myself as a psychiatrist, but as someone who was a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, sometimes an engineer if there were problems with the latrines that needed fixing or whatever. You had to really extend your role to what was needed. So I think that that really has helped me always think about biopsychosocial in a very, very real way.
Thank you very much for sharing such an emotive stories. And it also reminds us one of the reasons why I've chosen psychiatry, it's an holistic approach. Because it is not your role, it is at the end of the day how you can help people in distress. Now that leads to my next questions. Many psychiatrists are interested in international volunteering but don't know where to start. So what's your advice for them?
Well, I probably could tell you about the way I did it and the mistakes I made as well. But I actually found that the college was a really good platform for starting me on this. The college has a volunteering program. There's VIpSIG, so it's a good platform to get information. And in the book that we have, we've given sort of a list of various opportunities and places to contact as well, which might be helpful. So I think I would. No, the challenges can be things like getting time off. There's lots of practical obstacles, but if you're really committed to it, there's a way. I, and some projects have been a bit easier that fit in with our lives. There are some projects I've been involved with in the past. For example, in Somaliland, we would go for 2 weeks to do a set lot of training and teaching. And that fitted in very well. It did mean that I didn't take any holidays in my own job for a long time. Everything was working in my holiday time and getting unpaid leave as well.
Okay, I think that's good a point to start. So just to remind our viewers, the book it is available in the Amazons and any main street bookshops in UK. For the global readers, where could they get hold of that book, Peter? Is there any platform you can recommend?
Um, that's a hard question. And I'm a typical psychiatrist. I don't know some of these practical things. But I know that friends of mine in the US have got it through Amazon.
Okay.
And I think Cambridge Press, I would suspect that that's international as well.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there is an ebook available at some point for international readers. Now, we are almost coming to the end. There has been some criticism in the past, volunteering being a short-term effort. Um, so, how can we ensure that it is not just short-term, but has some long-lasting change through our volunteering work?
By us putting in the energy, maintaining the links, uh, investing in people, doing lots of training. If you're working at a government level, helping change systems that are right for that place. I can think of an example of Turkmenistan, which is quite a challenging country, which is very isolated. It's very, very hard to get there. But I've been going there since 2016. And I always say this is a slow burn because you're going to see things happen, but it's going to be very, very slowly. Some of the post-Soviet states, there can be a lot of challenges that may not be elsewhere. And so I'm still involved with Turkmenistan now. That's 9 years later, and it will get there, but it's slow, and it has involved me keeping up that link and keeping up the link with people. So other examples I can think of, when we did our Sudan project, we followed it up with online supervision for a year afterwards. And it's actually the supervision that can be one of the key things to ensure that we don't just do a training and it gets forgotten, but that it gets embedded and can change practice. But the other way of ensuring that things don't get lost is resources, unfortunately, has to be kept up and invested in. But what I have found a bit reassuring is that things stop and then they start again, and that's okay. For example, I can say in Ukraine, I did a lot of work in Ukraine, and I do think it really helped because when the war started, it was maybe they're on a sort of a higher platform. And the work that has happened in mental health in Ukraine has been phenomenal. Um, Sudan is another country that I've worked in quite a bit, but I really can't say what's happening there, but maybe it will help in the future.
Great. I think lots of examples that there are ways to continue the volunteering work to make a long-lasting changes. Now we are reaching the final message. If you had to sum up the essence of your message to inspire our listeners, what would it be?
Okay, I would say if you're in any doubt about doing this sort of work, um, do it. And you've got to push yourself. There may be sacrifices. You've got to really put a lot of energy and effort into making it work. And if you got the commitment, it will happen, and it will make you a better psychiatrist back in the UK, and it will probably make you a better person, I would say. And I've never heard anyone who had experience working, doing volunteer work overseas who ever regretted it. It's always something that's life affirming and life changing, and it can build up connections and relationships that last your lifetime.
Thank you, Peter, for your time on this Saturday morning. And our viewers, that brings us to the end of this episode of Beyond Borders, the VIpSIG podcast. And huge thank you to Dr. Peter Hughes for sharing his insights on this journey of VIpSIG, the power of volunteering, and how we can all play a role in making a difference. At VIpSIG, we believe that global mental health is a shared responsibility. Volunteering is not just about giving, it's about growing, learning, and making meaningful connections across the globe. This podcast is all about sharing real experiences, the successes, the challenges, and the lessons learned. If you have a story, an idea, or a perspective to share, we would love to feature you in future episode. Get in touch with us via our RCPsych website, and do stay tuned with our newsletters where Dr. Peter Hughes' interview will be featured. Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ennis.